America is facing a fertility crisis. But what are we being offered? And is it really addressing the root problems of reproductive health? Here's the point. Right now, 1 in 8 American couples struggle with infertility, double the rate since the 1960s. The U.S. fertility rate has dropped to 1.6 births per woman, well below the national replacement rate of 2.1. Instead of asking why Americans can't conceive naturally, we're often told the answer is found in reproductive technology like IVF, an $8 billion industry treating infertility as a technical problem. But here's what couples aren't told. IVF doesn't cure infertility. It doesn't address why women's bodies aren't ovulating properly, why male sperm counts have dropped 50% in 40 years, or why endometriosis rates are skyrocketing. IVF has become the Ozempic of infertility. It bypasses the condition rather than healing it. Make no mistake, God's design isn't flawed. For thousands of years, most couples conceived without difficulty. However, something has changed. Until we confront what's making American couples sterile, we're only enriching the industry, profiting from the problem rather than solving it. So, what should we think about this? First, understand what restorative medicine is and why it works. In an age of infertility, reproductive restorative medicine treats patients by identifying and correcting underlying medical conditions. Rather than creating embryos in a lab, it uses diagnostic tools to track hormonal cycles, identifying issues like low progesterone, endometriosis, or thyroid dysfunction. Doctors then treat those conditions directly so the body can conceive naturally. The results are remarkable. Clinical studies show couples using NAPRO technology have pregnancy rates comparable to IVF, without embryo destruction, massive financial burden, or health risks to the mother and child. Alyssa Brown, founder of the Abortion Healing and Hope Network, put it this way: reproductive restorative medicine respects both the dignity of human life and the design of the human body. It doesn't treat fertility like a malfunction to be bypassed. It treats it like a health issue to be healed. This matters because young, healthy couples in their 20s and 30s are struggling to conceive at unprecedented rates. Something is systematically breaking down reproductive health across an entire generation. Second, we must recognize the role big food and big pharma play in this crisis. Our American food supply is saturated with endocrine disrupting chemicals, plastics, pesticides, preservatives, and synthetic hormones. Our water contains trace pharmaceutical residue from birth control. Americans are exposed to thousands of chemicals that didn't exist 50 years ago, many directly impacting fertility. Men's testosterone levels have dropped 1% yearly for decades. Women today experience earlier menopause and more reproductive disorders than ever before. This isn't accidental. The same pharmaceutical companies profiting from infertility treatment produce many of these chemicals that cause it. The same food industry making billions off ultra-processed foods contributes to obesity and hormonal imbalances that destroy fertility. Rather than addressing root causes, the medical establishment points couples towards very expensive interventions like IVF that often fails without any guarantees. Emma Waters warns the fertility industry has little incentive to cure infertility when they can profit from treating its symptoms indefinitely. We need a medical model that prioritizes healing over profit. The problem is perverse incentives. Until we regulate toxins poisoning our bodies and food supply, we're not serious about solving infertility. Third, we desperately need legislation like the Restore Act. Most insurance companies cover IVF, but won't cover reproductive restorative medicine. That's exactly backwards. The Restore Act, introduced by Congressman Chris Smith, would provide federal support for restorative reproductive medicine, research, and treatment. It recognizes infertility as a disease which requires medical treatment to address it. Most Americans have never heard of RRM. Doctors tell them IVF is the only option when proper diagnosis and treatment could restore natural fertility. Christians, especially, need to know there's an alternative that doesn't create and destroy embryos or reduce children to products. We need medical schools teaching RRM, more research funding, and public awareness. Right now, the only voices Americans hear belong to the IVF industry, which has zero interest in curing the underlying problem they profit from. Finally, Christians must lead. This is about God's design for life. God created male and female with the capacity to conceive and bear children. When that's not working, the answer isn't laboratory conception. It's identifying what's broken and fixing it. RRM respects both human dignity and bodily integrity. This is a pro-life issue. Every year, hundreds of thousands of embryos are created through IVF, and most are destroyed or frozen indefinitely. Christians who oppose abortion cannot ignore mass embryo destruction in fertility clinics across America. That has increasingly become an issue facing the Christian conscience, and more have been speaking up on this issue. So what should we do? First, educate yourselves on restorative reproductive medicine. Understand that infertility is not always fatalistic, but it is a disease and it can be treated. Seek out doctors who are trained in this medicine and who are advocating for more healthier ways to address infertility. We need real healing. America's fertility crisis is curable. We need to recognize that what we put in our bodies, both food and drug, contributes to much of our brokenness today. Always address these issues with care, concern, and compassion. Many couples who are devastated by infertility need our love and support. Remember, God's design is by no means flawed, but our food supply and healthcare systems are. Today, it takes more courage to advocate for RRM rather than following along with the prescribed IVF. We should do all we can to fix what's broken rather than bypassing it.